You're about to listen to a podcast full of wonder, excitement, and discovery. It's time for an adventure through Odyssey. Hey everyone, welcome back to the Adventures Through Odyssey podcast, Odyssey Revisited. I'm Will here with John. We've got our second episode of Album 74, Renee Renewed, which has some very controversial things in it, so let's get to it. When Renee helps Horace out using some of Mr. Whitaker's technology, things get dicey.
So yeah, I think the obvious thing to talk about here is that it seems like referencing Novacom.
Yes.
Or some Novacom-esque thing coming back. They even kind of, they directly reference Novacom here. I guess not a direct reference, but imply like something like this happened like a while ago.
Yes, and I actually appreciate that Renee read about it, so it's not this weird secret, because if Novacom tried to take over the world, I think everybody would kind of know about it.
Yeah. Yeah, like there'd be some knowledge, at least locally, that it definitely happened. At least nationally, it's like this organization was found to be like running like some weird experience. Like nationally, they probably have some awareness of this company was like trying to like do this big plot. They probably don't know how close it was to actually happening.
Right.
You know? I'll say this though. So obviously, like the technology that's being used here is this thing that can directly like change a person's personality.
Yes.
Okay, so there's a lot of things to talk about that. Like with that, I'll say this. It kind of goes to like Renee being like, what could possibly be wrong with this? Like Novacom, like a more like subtle kind of like thing. Like it's like, you know, like obviously I think like it's way more complicated than they talk about. It's like, you know, you can do brainwaves to radio waves. What about the reverse? Radio waves to brain waves, which is like, you know, bad, like obviously bad. But like the idea that it's like, oh, directly change a person's personality without giving a lot of like setup to like any like even like simple explanation for that.
Yeah, I mean, they make up all this jargon about it, and maybe it is real. It was very interesting, one, the steamy scene between Horace and Renee.
I know, that was weird.
Yes, it
really
was.
Weird.
Yes, I was very uncomfortable that whole scene.
Yeah.
And then, because I thought, oh, maybe when Horace uses it, it's a placebo effect because he thinks the machine's affecting him. When they try it on Trey, it won't work.
Yeah.
Which actually could have been an interesting place to take it.
No, I agree. I mean, it's such a, like, it's almost like, it's an incredibly impressive piece of tech, but this guy's just randomly making it. Like, we know Horace.
Yes, we do.
A little bit. But there's no indication that he's, like...
a savant.
Yeah, like that he could create something like that. Like, that's so incredibly, like, whoa. Like, right, this is basically, like, something that I'm sure people around the world are working on. And it's like, oh, we just need to put a little bit of Mr. Whitaker's code into this, and then it works perfectly.
It is another one of those episodes that, oh, the Imagination Station has a lot of weird technology in it.
I mean, here's the thing. It's a really interesting setup to where, like, it's a really interesting setup of, like, where it can go. Like, I think it is, like, it's like Novacom, but even with higher stakes, because instead of, like, it being subtle, it's, like, not even subtle at all.
Yes.
But it's even, like, kind of like the technology that's being used in, like, in the Jason, like, in the 3 or 4-parter, or the whole...
28 hours, the whole nanobots controlling Jason's mind.
Right, like, it's all basically, like, any of, like, the... Novacom's coming back with a vengeance, and they're not gonna, like... They're not being subtle. They're just going flat out mind control this time.
I mean, maybe that's the way to do it. I will be curious to see if that's true, because the one thing about the original Novacom, it's a great saga. It's a little long, and you can tell they didn't 100% know where they were going to finish.
Yeah.
And I do hope maybe this time they've got a slightly more mapped out plan.
Yeah. And I think and let's kind of go to Renee's, like, personality / actions in this episode.
Well, first, did you listen to the Renee recap they very nicely gave us on the club?
I did not.
So it was just a quick recap of the episode she's been in. What I loved about it is it's on the club. Assumedly because Renee is a club-only character, so when people buy the CDs, they can hear this and know who Renee is. However, it's very weird to hear it on the club.
Yeah, that makes sense. But it does make sense to, like, put it in there being like, this is, like, the past stuff. Do you think they'll ever, like, release in stores, like, just a big club bundle?
I don't know. Maybe if they discontinue the club, but yeah. I cannot imagine a scenario where they do that. But I will say, because I posted a screen cap of part of one of the comics to our Instagram story just to make a joke about it. And I got some pretty heated messages from people like, this is exclusive content. Not everyone has the club. Da 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 da. So I guess there's more people who don't have the club than we thought, or everyone was just being kind of overprotective. If I was on the family told me to take it down, I would. But
yeah, so let me say this. There is, like, a sense of entitlement. I shouldn't say entitlement. I do think there, and not in, like, exclusively Adventures in Odyssey thing, but, like, people being like, no, this is, like, exclusive content that I'm paying for. Other people shouldn't be getting it. Yeah, because presumably if you're presumably Focus, as long as you're not posting the whole comic, probably wouldn't mind you posting that, because if there are non-club subscribers, they'd probably be like, oh yeah, like I want to read this. Like, I didn't know this was on the club.
Oh yeah.
So, like, that's, like, probably, like, decent advertising for, as long as you're not posting, like, screen by screen all the comics.
Absolutely.
So, I may get some flack for this from people that's like, oh, John, you play this. But I'll play a little Fortnite sometimes. And sometimes they'll bring back a skin or something that was, like, considered exclusive, or, like, something that's, like, similar, and, like, people online freak out, like, how dare you, like, this was exclusive, like, I wouldn't have bought it if it was, like, so there's just a thing where being like, no, you can't share this content, the content is only for, like, the paying people, the people who had it first. So I feel like that's kind of the case, but I do think it's good that, I do wonder if they would do, like, a Renee saga, like, album.
You see, I would, like, do that.
Store album?
Yeah. Because if you listen to this episode, it's like all the greatest hits of Renee are brought up in one episode. So it's real. So the recap helps because it's Robot Dog, the Professor, and all the stuff she's doing with the Imagination Station.
Yeah.
Like, I wonder if this was supposed to be a club episode at one point, but graduated after the Eugene stuff happened.
Yeah, I mean, really quick before we go to Renee, it's almost weird because they reference Eugene, like, 2 or 3 times in this episode, and I don't know if they're doing that to, like, explain, like, why he's gone. But even, like, with who's the kid they use it on? Trey, like, says, like, they call me, like, mini Eugene or, like, little Eugene or something with how he talks.
Yeah.
So it's just interesting considering Will Ryan's passing. Like, they're trying to, like, play it up to be like, oh, Eugene's busy at the college, and to explain why he's not there.
Yes. So I assume that means Eugene will return in some capacity at some point.
Yeah, that's what I'm gathering too.
Because 1, Buck's still a major player, and 2, I feel like they would have just never mentioned him again if they didn't have any plans.
Yeah, that's the thing. I think we would get really, like, silence, and then there's suddenly, like, an episode where they like say what happens.
Yeah, I mean, I just hope it isn't during this Novacom 2.0. Oh no, a building in the college exploded. Eugene was in there.
Dad!
Exactly. I mean,
like, or suddenly Eugene's going off to Africa to see his brother and father, and, like, yes. Katrina stays with Buck.
I mean, that could happen.
It could happen. It's not the worst, actually, idea they could do. But here's the thing with Renee. Like, Renee, like, there's whole things about, like, ethics, like, like, philosophy that they've talked about with Renee. And Renee was very much against, like, like, that professor, like, messing with, like, her, like, artificially created, like, civilization.
Yeah.
And so it feels weird that she sees no issue. She's like, oh, all the positive effects. Like, they're like, it could help, like, people like Trey, or, like, help, like, people, like, to achieve things they may not be able to do normally. But, like, the fact she can't see, like, the horrible, like, also possible ramifications of essentially changing people's personalities with a machine.
Yes.
Does seem a little bit like, what?
Right, and actually, how do I want to describe this? I do kind of give the writers credit for showing no downsides to using the machine, like, you know, effects-wise. So it's like, oh, you could sort of see how Renee is maybe, like, people's brains aren't exploding. So I give them credit for not, like, showing this big, obvious medical downside to it. I do agree. I don't want to say it's out of character for Renee, because she even says, I acted like that doctor a bit. And, you know, Wit. And we'll get to Wit in a minute. But, right. I would say this. If I was a kid who was only listening to the albums, although I think A Year of the Club might be cheaper than both of the albums they release every year, but that could just be, I could be mathing that out wrong. And I just heard this Renee episode for the first time, I would think Renee's a pretty bad character.
Yeah, that's I think part of it is, like, it really feels like they've been building up Renee to be a good character, and she has, like, a little redemption at the end, but it's like, whoa, like, that's, like, pretty intense. It's like if you hadn't heard an episode with Connie and suddenly it was the episode about giving money.
Yes.
And suddenly the character, almost for the sake of, like, the plot, is suddenly, like, doing something, like, so, like, outside of their, like, kind of what we've expected of them. And people can do that, but it's just interesting.
I totally agree.
I will say this. I think they wanted this episode a little too much to reflect applesauce.
A little bit, yes.
Because they're talking about, like, oh, this was such a breach of trust. Like, they're really like, you breached my trust. Like, you violated what I wanted you to do. And it's a little bit, like, in a way, like, but, like, I don't think, like, in many situations, I guess, like, it is stealing to an extent, though we'll get to an aspect of that in a second, like, to take the code. But I also feel like in most situations, I mean, it would have been nice to ask, but I guess, like, I think it more had to do with, like, the ethical implications. Like, if he had taken Wit's code and put it in something that was, like, not as, like, scary.
Right. No,
I can't imagine Mr. Whittaker would have really minded that much.
That is true, but this goes back to something that we've definitely brought up before, that, because I just listened to Wayland in the Windy City for an episode we're going to record, and, you know, they wipe that computer of government secrets. Wit deletes applesauce, and Blackguard briefly mentioned the Darkness Before Dawn, you know, Whittaker has destroyed so many government programs in the past.
Yeah.
All I'm saying is, maybe we're also going to get a little bit of a storyline about Wit maybe didn't do the right thing in those situations.
I mean, if they did that, you know, I give them credit, but I also feel like that's so far in the past.
Yeah.
For some of it that I wonder if they would do that. I mean, here's the thing. I think Wit's is right to be, I think the soliciting kids for kind of dangerous technological experiments in his store is a little more upsetting, even though, like, they do, like, try to, like, I think they did this to make Renee not seem like a complete, like, crazy evil person. He's like, but we got his parents' permission.
Exactly. Although his dad's a brain surgeon.
Right. It's like someone wrote it probably with, like, otherwise, like, maybe they just walked up to Trey, like, hey, do you want to try this thing? And then they're like, you can't, like, you needed to get the parents' permission. And, like, that was added later, because I think Wit being more upset would make more sense if it was like they, like, looked for kids in Wit's End instead of just, like, meeting in Wit's End.
Yes, but I would say the one thing is, Renee and Horace is there. He should know that should be in a way more controlled environment than Wit's End.
Yeah, no, I fully agree. Here's the thing. I think Wit has a right to be upset. I think
I agree.
I want to make that clear. I think what Renee did was really bad and is really, like, kind of iffy, like, a really, like, questionable thing, and to, like, Right. I think they just lean a little too much on the aspect that, like, I feel like they were going hard for the applesauce vibes, like it was a violation of trust. And here's the problem. And let me just get into this right now. They talk, I'm in law school. They talk a little bit about IP law in this episode, like, oh, like he probably has a patent on it. Actually, my assumption is Whit doesn't have a patent on his technology.
That's very possible.
Because then he has to reveal his technology, because in the past he's talked about how, like, he's, like, very, like, iffy. My also guess is Whit doesn't make his employees sign, like, non-disclosure agreements.
Sounds about right.
This is from the pure legal aspect. I think in terms of, like, it probably is a breach of his own trust to seal this thing without asking him. However, I also will say this. As far as I can tell, she just took the code, right?
Yes.
This is my own little nitpick. Technically, everyone, code is under copyright law, not under patent law. And copyright law, she's like, I could probably, like, change it around a little bit. It's like, yeah, you really could, because, like, and also because of a recent Supreme Court decision, Oracle v. Google, it's actually really easy to take, like, underlying pieces of code and, like, say that, and, like, even beat for beat and say it's fair use.
Yes.
So I don't expect the Odyssey writers to go out about that, but I'm like, clearly, like, purely from, like, a law standpoint, like, she probably was fine to probably use that, like, the little bits of code she used. However, I get from a trust standpoint Whit would be upset, but I think it's also, like, the reason he's the most upset is what it was being used for. Is this really, like, kind of scary technology?
Yes, I would agree.
And I just think they went really hard on the trust thing, when it's more like, I feel like the episode would have been more to be, like, considering, like, the bounds of, like, humanity.
That's a good point.
And bring in, like, some of this philosophy stuff in, where it's like the trust issue is definitely a thing, but I don't know. I felt like you're trying really hard for the applesauce vibes here.
I don't disagree. And to go into some non-legal story-related stuff, there was part of me that was surprised they wrapped it all up in one episode. I thought maybe Renee would leave, and then something happens to Trey, or the fake code fries his brain or something.
Well, right, and that's why I also think it's more about, like, being your own person is more the moral, because Trey and, like, Renee, like, figuring out the problem comes from that being like, it's not really me. Like, I want to be my own person.
Agreed. Now, I will say, because Whit finds out about the virtual dog and doesn't say to Renee, Renee, you've got a great money-making invention right there.
That would be funny. But I mean, I think there's also other like questions of, like, reviving your dog as, like, a computer AI, essentially. I mean, I'll say this, and Trey alludes to it. Like, Renee, he's like, why do you think, like, I needed this thing to talk, like, better?
It is true.
Like, it's like, yeah, it is a huge insult because she's like, I know exactly who we can go to who wants to change his personality.
Right, and I will say this. I appreciate it was Trey, and they didn't, like, go to Jay or Vance or somebody to try to make them behave.
Well, because they needed someone who could realistically, like, be like, yeah, he wouldn't want to use this technology. And Jay would use it to try to, like, go all suave with Zoe.
Well, Jay does that all the time, and Zoe just doesn't go for it.
Yeah, but maybe it would actually be effective.
That's a good point.
Let me say, I've made points about this episode. I actually think this is an interesting episode. I think it actually would have been better as a two-parter. Like, explain some of the underlying technology, maybe explain, like, some of the more issues with Trey.
Yeah, let Renee thing breathe, because I actually thought that first scene where Whit's telling her no was something she was doing in the imagination station to walk through it.
Yeah, like, have, like, the end of the first part be, like, Whit being like, I can't believe you did this.
Right.
And then, like, and the cliffhanger's like, I'm not going to take I'm not going to keep being at Whit's End.
I'm surprised Whit let her stay at Whit's End, honestly, because the experimenting on kids part.
Right. I guess, like, that's why they did the parent thing, to be like, well, she did have the parents' permission, and I didn't, like, explicitly say that, but it is like Wit is. You can tell Wit's like hurt.
Yes, and I think that's why if Connie had been in this episode, they could have had a scene where they talk about the events of Applesauce, but that's just me. So I do also want to mention, much like last week where I feel like they wrapped up too quickly, Horace disappears once Renee comes clean to Wit. So
I mean, maybe Horace is going to be like a bad-ish guy in this whole thing of like pursuing this.
Well, and that's what I wondered. If this is really Novacom round 2, is Horace going to be maybe not like the villain, but somebody who sides with somebody at Campbell County College who's working with Novacom and gives them the technology? I'm just saying there could have been a quick postlude where we see an angry Horace and he's starting to talk to somebody or something.
I could see it something like a Richard Maxwell-esque thing where it's like he being like, I mean, Richard Maxwell did bad things and like Horace may do bad things. But, like, in the end, he, like, comes around.
Yes.
Right, because it could be someone, like, wants to get Wit's technology, and this guy has a working thing that's really close to what they want that implements Wit's code, and there's going to be, like, a moral episode with Horace where Horace is like, should I give it? Like, isn't this stolen? And maybe then they bring up the IP copyright fair use law. And it's like, it's actually not it's actually okay to use this. Here's the Google v. Oracle Supreme Court decision that says it's okay.
Oh my gosh. Now, if they were to like, can they please pull out that lawyer from the Rodney falls through the glass ceiling episode?
That would be hilarious.
So, but yeah, I just like, they don't need to like wrap up Horace's story. I just would have liked one more scene with him, even if it doesn't have any bearing on anything.
Yeah. No, I agree. I mean, I think it's an intriguing episode. If there's more to this, it's actually like a decent little setup. And I'm glad they didn't have Renee necessarily be like evil after this part, but I think they could have had this be 2 parts. But also at the same time, like I just feel like they make Renee's character very different from how she kind of has been.
Yes, I actually thought they got a new voice actor because she had less of a Scottish accent, and it is the same voice actor, so I don't know what happened there, but...
I wonder if they told her to tone it down for the non-club episode.
That'd be really funny. Our uneducated non-club fans won't be able to understand.
We love our club and non-club listeners equally. Like,
yeah, yes.
Don't worry.
Yes, I pay for Netflix with ads, so I get it.
I don't, and going back, I said the entitlement thing. Not that I think club fans are entitled, but I get like the thing of being like, isn't this exclusive content? Like, I understand that, but I also think posting one image of one comic isn't.
Correct. Okay, so quick final thoughts on the episode, and if this is Novacom 2.0, where do we go from here?
Yeah. I mean, I think you have an episode. If you do it, I mean, you have to combine like different things. I mean, I think having someone out of a college. I mean, didn't Novacom technically start out of a college program? Because like Eugene was doing like experiments at the college.
Yes, my only thing is if Novacom's really going to try again, they need to have a believable reason for why they do it again in Odyssey.
What if the evil professor actually was revealed to have been involved in the original, like directly involved with Novacom the first time?
That feels like something they do.
Which could be interesting to like bring it forth, like why is it happening at Odyssey again? That this guy's like kind of like a linchpin in a lot of this. I think that professor could come back. I think Horace could definitely play a part in it. I think it's gonna start with like him selling the technology, like Horace or like someone getting or selling that like technology to a company, and then it's revealed that it's essentially the Novacom 2.0 company.
Yes. I mean, they already mentioned Nova Plus as a thing in one of the comics, but I would also say what?
No, say what you're going to say.
I also think whatever's going on with, and I've said this before, Emily, Maury, Susu, and Trey, and the eventual team is going to wind up playing back into this.
Yeah. No, I think there's a lot of really interesting pieces, especially like because you have a lot of like weird like tech investigative like government characters.
Yes.
That you could do something really interesting. I do think it's like it's a little less subtle than Novacom's talking, but it's also clear they're like bringing Novacom stuff back. So it's like hard to be subtle when like us fans like know that like this is probably where they're going with it. Or with like Aram.
Right, just remember, the chairman was in the last album. I don't think we remember that because he didn't show up in the last episode. So
yeah. No, like they're clearly like setting this up, and I'm excited. Like I think this is a good episode to like get people excited about it. I just thought there were a few weird like character moments.
Yes, so I don't, because we've got 4 episodes left. I'm gonna guess none of them are gonna tie back into this Novacom stuff. Whereas, I mean, maybe like the Wooten Law one. That'd be kind of funny, but
that would be funny. I think what I was gonna say, if I can remember it, it had Aram, and then I can't. Just keep going.
Okay, so I mean, for me, if I'm going to do Novacom round 2, can we kind of make it like the Blackguard triplets running everything, so we can like have Richard, Maxwell, Mitch, and everybody come in for one big blowout at the end?
I don't know if we need the Blackguard triplets. I mean, it would be fun to have Richard Maxwell show up again somehow. But
yes, so
here's what I was gonna say. Here's the thing I forgot. I think it could be very like I feel like if it's Novacom coming back. I mean, the Nova Plus in the comics, but who knows if that's like how canon that is.
So someone did text me saying the comics are canon according to the writers. So
okay. Well, because what I would say is this, is if Novacom comes back and flat out it is Novacom again, I mean, I give Odyssey some, and they actually deal with like I could give them some credit if they try to do a nuanced thing of like these organizations or people who have done horrible things pretending like everything's just okay now.
Yes.
I kind of doubt they're going to go that deep into it. If they do, I'll give them a lot of credit. If they don't, I also kind of understand them just saying, like, it's Novacom again. And, like, everyone in Wits End is just like, I don't believe them and not get into necessarily that subtlety. But, like, it could be an interesting little episode.
Well, I mean, what it could be is if Renee's graduated to full character, Wit and Connie and Eugene, if they've replaced him by this point, could all be worried and everybody else is just going to act like it's okay, but they inherently don't trust Novacom.
Yeah.
Then I don't know.
Plus is a funny idea, though.
Yeah, but here's the question. What kid has the fall from the tower or Lucy exploding in the imagination station?
I'm not going to lie. I mean, I don't know if the Parkers are still in Odyssey. If they want to tie Matthew and Emily's relationship back together...
Oh, that could work.
Like, that would be a really solid way to do it. If not, I could honestly see it being Jay if they want to have almost a Jay redemption arc.
Maybe. I also thought, you know who needs to be on Wit and Connie's anti-Novacom team?
Who?
Wyatt.
Oh, honestly, yeah. Let me say this. I could see it being Maury.
Yeah.
If it's to, like, save Emily. Like, I actually think the kid, it's not going to be Emily. But it's going to be someone adjacent to Emily, either Maury or Matthew seems like the obvious choice. And that, like, repairs Emily's relationship with them.
Oh, that could work.
But that would be my guess.
And yes, I'm aware we're predicting this big Odyssey, I don't know, Crisis on Infinite Earths level event.
Jimmy!
Look, I am still...
Jimmy's here from DC to report on it.
He wasn't even in the original Novacom.
I know.
Look, I still stand by, if they ever replace Wit, I think having some of the old kids come back and run Wit's End is the way to go.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Now,
or have Connie run Wit's End. That'd probably be a little...
I feel like my problem is, if they were choreographing Wit leaving, I think they would have already started that by now.
That's probably true.
Like, I think that would be like a 4 to 5 year, and maybe, I mean, that's how far away we are from the end of this, like, Novacom storyline. But, like,
that's possible.
I feel like they would be, like, setting, like, the seeds for that really beforehand.
True.
I think they have no intention of killing off any major character until, I mean, like, they did Tom, but even, like, Tom, I think by the point in the series, I wouldn't call him like a first tier character.
Yes, I would agree.
Like, yeah. Like, I think unless the show ends, like, unless, or they're like, oh, like, we lost, like, Andre Stoica as Wit.
I mean, they might that might happen at some point.
Well, right, at some point, but.
So,
you know.
Anyway, for all we know, Novacom Round 2 won't happen, and we're just postulating here, but it does kind of feel like, unless they're just doing it for cheap pops, all of the pieces are coming together for it.
Yeah, personally, this episode's better if it does result in Novacom happening. I think this episode's, like, because it's like, I get why, as a character motivation, they would consider, I understand why, as like a character motivation sort of thing, they would have Renee act like this if it's supposed to lead into Novacom and it's supposed to lead into these greater questions. If it's not, and this is just where the episode ends, it's really weird.
Yes, because the episode feels like it's a very full 22 minutes, and it kind of feels like it is a puzzle piece we have to fill in. Oh, that was the one thing I wanted to mention. Wit knows Renee's going to do this and just takes the plans out of his filing cabinet.
Yeah, that seems a little much.
I mean, I guess on one hand, I appreciate this shows how Renee's going to be different from Connie or Eugene, that she's a little more conniving.
Yeah.
So we will see. I'm curious to see where they go with this. I'm interested. It's been 2 really good episodes, but it's been 2 episodes that felt like they were bursting at the seams.
Yeah, and that's not bad. Like, to say, like, oh, it's like, we're basically saying, like, we wanted more in a way, which is better than saying, like, this was too long.
Oh, yeah.
But, like, it's like, yeah, like, these are, like, it's like, these are great ideas. It's like, I actually want more of these ideas, you know?
Yes, exactly. So I think that's a good place to be.
Yeah.
All right, so that wraps it up. We will probably post the next episode a little late, unless we can figure something out with our vacation. We'll have a new Odyssey episode out for you on Wednesday as normal, but I'm Will.
I'm John.
We'll see you next time.